Yeah, so we're going to start from where we stopped last time. But before I continue, I want to go over what we talked about last week, which is how to include JavaScript on the page. We talk about two methods that you can use to include JavaScript on the page. We have the internal and we have the external method. So how do you include your JavaScript? Is by using the script tag. And your script tag, you can place it anywhere. But I told you last time that by convention, we normally put it at the bottom part of the site, which means before the closing body. And there's a reason why we are doing it like this. It's because you want your page content to load first before the script is going to load. Because the way the browser is going to interpret your code is depending on the way you arrange them. So which means if you put the script inside the edge and that script is something that is really big, so the browser needs to load that script first before you move to the next line. So what the browser is doing is that it's interpreting your code line by line. So it will see this line one. Once it's done with line one, it's going to line two, it's going to line three, and so forth like that until it gets to the end of everything, which is going to be this HTML here. But because this thing, your system is really fast and what is there is not taking time, you only see everything at once on your screen there. But when you are dealing with JavaScript, JavaScript is not something, when you are dealing with advanced JavaScript, it's something that can take a lot of time before it's going to load. And when that thing is blocking the rendering on the browser there, the browser have to stop on that line until the JavaScript done loading there. But you don't want the user to be seeing blank screen while the stuff is just loading there. So what do? We render all our normal HTML first. Then by the time we get to the end, that's where we now load the JavaScript, which is now going to add the interaction there. So most usually like this these days with new browser, but you should always do like this for older browser because you can't just say that the user will use new browser. Some of them can still be sticking with our phone that is still in 2012 and so forth like that. So you can't talk to your user that they should kind of use another phone or to use another browser that is going to be using the new feature. So that's the reason why this thing is always at the bottom part so that it will take care of the old and the new browser there like that. And what we are doing here, this side is what we call this external method because we are connecting to external JavaScript here. But if you don't want to connect to external JavaScript, you can actually call your script without the source. And once you call your script without the source, then whatever you are doing inside that tag is all about JavaScript, which is what we talked about last class. So whatever I'm doing here is all about JavaScript, but you are doing it directly inside the HTML file. But I won't be doing that because everything that I want to be typing there, I want to have the record about them. And I don't want to jam pack everything with the HTML there. So what do? We connect to our external JavaScript, which is a file that ends with this .js. So you can name it anything, but that .js is very important because that's how this thing is going to know that you are dealing with a JavaScript file. And inside it, you can do anything you want that is related to JavaScript there. And again, we started with this basic construct, which is starting with the console log. We talked about the comment, and at the same time, we talked about the basic data type. So the only thing that we not talking about last time here is this JavaScript tag, the key sensitivities of this JavaScript stuff. Because in JavaScript, it is not like the HTML. So here in JavaScript, capital A is not the same thing as small a. So the capital A here is not the same as this A here. So when you are dealing with your text or whatever stuff you are using in JavaScript, it is always case sensitive. It's not like the HTML that you can type your tag anyhow. So if I want, I can type my tag in uppercase there. So I can use capital H like this, and it is going to work with the HTML there. But JavaScript doesn't work like that. Whatever you're going to be doing with your JavaScript, you have to follow the case that you're using there. So if JavaScript is telling you that this needs to be in small letter, you must type it in small letter. If it's expecting capital letter for you, you must type it in capital letter. And if it's a mix of upper and lower case, then the way it is mixed there, that same way you are going to type it. So if you can't type any other thing, it will not work. And here now, this one is strict. So which means whatever you are doing, If it's not following what you're supposed to follow, which is the JavaScript construct there, you are going to get error. So when you are dealing with JavaScript, it is a case sensitive. So which means capital A is not the same thing as a small a there when you are using it in your program. So when you started using JavaScript, it is a case sensitive. So JavaScript is case sensitive. So which means anytime I create something and whatever I'm creating there is I'm using this A, B, C in this form. So if I want to use it later on, this is the same way I'm going to call it. Not that when you don't want to call it later on, you now be doing this small A, B, C. JavaScript will not know what is going on because this ABC here is not the same thing as this ABC here. Why? Because we have um, uppercase A here, but here now we have the lowercase for A. And since the case are different, then the two items here are not the same. So JavaScript is case sensitive. So whatever you are doing, whatever cases you're using, that's the same thing you always use. You can't change it to another thing. So if you want it to be in this form, this is how you are going to do it. And if you want it to be in this form, this is how you are going to represent it. Not that you start with this one and you now be calling it like this later on. No, it doesn't work like that. They are different stuff. So this one will be representing something else, and this one too will be representing another thing entirely there. So JavaScript is a case sensitive. So it is case sensitive. Whatever you be working with, make sure that you type it the way it's supposed to be typed there. So if it is in lowercase, type everything in lowercase. If it is uppercase, type it in that uppercase. And if it is mixed, then the way it's mixed there, that same way you are going to type it anytime you are using any of these constructs later on there. And part of the constructs that we've talked about here is the comment. We talked about the basic data type like number. We talked about the string. And what is string? String is just text, but the way we represent text here is quite different from the way you do it from the HTML. So when you want to represent any text, it needs to be in a quote, and the quote can either be this double or single, and at the same time you can have it inside this backtick. And what is double quote? You know that one is on your keyboard. So this is a text. So this is text, and at the same time too, I can put it inside a single quote. And if I want, I can put it inside a backtick. And backtick is the key before the before the key 1 on your keyboard there. So there's a character there that is facing back. And if you type it, it will bring out this backtick. And whatever you type inside this one too, it's still going to give you the same thing. So you can represent your text in these 3 ways. We have the double quotes, we have the single quotes, and we have the backtick method. And you're going to see the difference between them later on. But right now, there is no difference. So if you like, you can use double quote. If you want, you can use a single quote. And if you don't want to use the two, you can go with the backtick there like that. But later on, there's some time we're going to be using backtick that you can't use this one for that. But for now, you can use any one of them to represent your text. So when you want to represent any text, it needs to be in a quote. You don't just type it. If you type it like this, you are doing something else. And that something else is what I want to explain next. Because if I type it right now, JavaScript is telling me that testing is not defined. Why is it telling me that it's not defined? It's because it's thinking that this thing is something else. And that thing that it's thinking about is what we refer to as this variable is there. So it's what we refer to as variables. But before I get to variables there, we have other types apart from this string. We have the boolean, which is what we use to represent whether something is okay or not, whether something is yes or no. So when something is okay, we have this true for the value. And when something is not okay or when something is no, we have false to represent that type of value. Now, when you're representing number now, the number, what you do is just to type the number you want. So 3, 6, these are number. But now, if there is a quote there, this is not number, this is string. Once there is quote around the content, it is not any other type again, it is a string. Whatever you have inside a quote, whether it is double or single or backtick, it is string. So it will not treat it as a number or boolean or whatever stuff you are doing there. And again, if you want to represent boolean, so we have the true to represent something that is okay, yes, or anything that is positive. That's what this true is all about. And we have false when you have negative or no, or something is not going the way it's supposed to go there. We use false to represent that value. Or maybe you are looking for something on the page, you ask the browser, is this thing on the page? What do you get back? You either get yes or no. And when something is on the page, it will give you true. If it is not there, it will give you false. And these are the two values that we're using to represent Boolean, which is what you use to check whether something is okay or it's not okay, whether something is yes or it's not yes, and so forth like that, depending on your interpretation of the Boolean there like that. So and apart from Boolean, we have these other two types that are very important here, which is null and undefined. And this is what you'll be using to represent um, the value that doesn't exist there. So sometimes when you're looking for something on the page, the browser is not going to return back to you that it's there or it's not there. You're actually looking for the element. And when the element is not on the page, what you either get there is this null or undefined, which represents that there is nothing. So what you are looking for is not there. And when that is not there, or you have a variable later on and you don't have a value to that variable, what you are going to get is undefined, which represent that that thing doesn't have what you are looking for there. And you are going to see this thing soon by the time we started creating this our variable there like that. So types, these basic types are very important because this is just the building block of what you'll be doing later on there, even though we have some other complex type, but everything starts from this small this basic type, and from there you combine them together to form other compound or complex type later on there like that. So the number, the string, the boolean, the null or undefined, they are basic type that you can use there, and all the value that you're going to be using in your code will be coming from these basic types there, even though you are going to have the complex one later on, but the complex one is just the combination of all these basic one that we have there. And right now you know how to represent each one of the types there. So when you want to deal with number, you already know how to bring out the number. Not that you'll be putting in a quote and you'll be thinking it's number. It's not number. Anything in a quote is a string there. I hope you are following. Hello.
Yes, I'm following, sir.
Okay. So what next? What next? So the next thing we have here now is variables. So the next thing we have here now is variables. And what is variables? Variables are names that you can use to represent values. So variables are names that you can use to represent values. And what do you use it for? For example, here now, assuming we have age. So on the page, we are displaying some content, and one of the content is the age of the user, or the username of the user, or the photo of the user. So the value that you are going to be using on the page, it's coming from somewhere. Maybe you are getting it from the back end here. But where are you going to save that data to, so that you can have access to it anytime you need to reuse that value? For example, here now I have age, so I can just type 2. 2 here, what is this 2 all about? What is it representing? It's until someone tell you that, okay, this 2 is for the age, or here now Abdulrakib is going to be our username, or Abdul right here is going to be name. So what is this thing representing? So you can use a name to represent a particular value, and anytime you need that value, you don't need to type it again. What you just call is the name of that particular value, just like the way we have it in CSS that we talked about there. This is where the CSS borrowed this concept from, that we are using a variable to represent different value like colors, the size, and so forth like that. So here too, you can have a name to represent a value, and that name that you are using to represent value is what we refer to as variables. So variables are names that we use to represent a value in computer memory there. But in JavaScript, we have ways of creating a variable, we have ways of declaring a variable, and we have way of assigning a variable. Because anytime you are dealing with a variable, we have declaration, we have initialization, and at the same time we have assignment of a variable there. So let me put the same on the screen. So when you are dealing with a variable, when you're dealing with a variable, you can define a variable. So let me put the li. Uh, so let me put it variable declaration. So what is declaration? Is just a way of just telling the developer that you want them to create a variable there. Apart from that, we have variable assignment. But before the variable assignment, or let me just put this one last. So the next one, which is the third one here, is going to be variable initialization. So which means here you are combining both the declaration and the assignment together. But how do you do all this thing? I'm going to show you there. But these are the names that we use for them. So later on, anytime I ask you to declare a variable, you already know what I'm talking about. Or anytime I said, okay, assign this particular variable this value, you know what is going on. Or anytime I say initialize the variable to this particular value, you know what I'm talking about there, like that. So here, you can either declare a variable, or you assign to a variable, or you initialize a variable. So we have the variable initialization like this. And under this declaration, this is where you are going to be creating variable. So we have three items here under the variable. We can declare a variable, we can assign a variable, and we can initialize a variable. So what do we need to do now? We need to put all this in practice. So what do we need to do? We need to put it in practice. Let me arrange this in my JS file. So let me increase the screen. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, can you increase it a bit? Not really
Okay,
seeing
I
it.
don't want, okay, what about now? I don't want the text to go in and so
Yeah,
the,
it's okay. It is.
okay. So,
Awesome.
this variable declaration, which is where you are going to be declaring a variable. Because whatever variable you want to use, you need to let JavaScript to know about that variable first. You can't just come and say you want to use a particular variable. So JavaScript is going to complain that it doesn't know where that stuff is coming from there. And that's where we have this declaration. Look at it now. I want to have a variable. The name of the variable is age. But now if I just type age and run it, look at what the JavaScript is telling us. It's telling us that the age is not defined. It's because we've not really talked to JavaScript that we actually want to have this variable age. We've not really talked about anything. We are just accessing the age like that. So it's going to complain that here that it doesn't know where this age is coming from. So the first thing you need to do is to declare your variable. And how do you declare your variable? You can either use this let, or you can use const. But the const is going to come under this the variable initialization here, because that's where it used to be, where you'll be using it. But when you are declaring your variable, so when you are declaring a variable, you need to use this let, or you can use this var. I will not be using var. This is the old way of doing it, like that. So what I always be using is let here, because this is the new way of declaring a variable in JavaScript. But you can actually use this var too, and it's going to work. But this var actually have a problem, and that's the reason why they introduce this let to solve the problem of this var. But I always use the let. And how do you declare a variable? Is by starting with this let keyword, then followed by the name of a variable. So the next thing that follows is the name of the variable. And what I just did here is what we refer to as variable declaration. So what I just did on this line 29 is what we call variable declaration. And what is it saying here? What we are saying here is that we are talking to JavaScript that, okay, JavaScript, I want to have a variable, which means I want to have a name that is going to be representing a value later on. I don't have the value for it yet. I am just telling you that this variable, I will be using it later on to represent a particular value. And that's what we call declaration. So when you create a variable and you don't give it a value, we call it variable declaration. So we call this variable declaration. For example, here now, I can have let username. This username is a variable. Again, I can have let password now. This is another variable. Let age. This is another variable. Let school, like this. So school. So each one of them here, they are variable. And another way of declaring them is that you can actually put them on one line instead of putting them on a separate line there. So here, I can actually use let name 1, comma, name 2, name 3, and so forth like that. So this one too is a variable. But right now, we are declaring all the variable on one line instead of having it on a separate line. But for reading sake, you should always have them on a separate line like this. So please look at it. Oh, when you are doing it on one line, you separate them with comma here. But when you are doing it on a separate line, as you can see, each one of them are having their own separate let. So this one is a variable, this is a variable, this is a variable, this is a variable, and this is a variable. And again too, this line 35 too, we have these three variables, and everything here is what we call variable declaration. You only declare them, they don't have any value yet. So which means all these variable now, if we try to access them, what you'll be getting is undefined, because any variable that don't have value, what you get is undefined. And you know, we talked about this under the basic type. Null or undefined, we use it to represent something that doesn't exist, or the value that doesn't exist here. So right now we have all these variables, but all these variables, there is no value attached to them yet. Even though you can do it later on, that's where the assignment comes in there. But right now we only have the variable and we don't have anything there. So now if I try to access any one of them now, JavaScript is not going to complain. What is just going to return back is undefined, because they don't really have any value. So if I type age now, you see that it's not complaining again. What is now showing outside is undefined. So why is it showing undefined here? It's because we only create the variable, we've not really assigned, or we've not really put any value inside the variable. So the only thing we just did is that we let JavaScript to know that we are going to be using this variable later on, but we don't really have any value inside it currently. So how do you now put value inside your variable? So how do you put the value inside your variable? So the first thing you need to do is to declare a variable, and when the variable is already declared, so when you now want to assign, which is give your variable a value, what you do is that you are going to have the name of the variable, then followed by this symbol here, and followed by the value that you want to put inside that your variable. So when you are creating a variable and you want to put after you've already created your variable and you want to put a value inside that variable, you are going to be using this variable assignment here. And what is the variable assignment? So you are going to have your the variable on the left side, followed by this symbol here, which you normally call equal to, but here it's not equal to. There's another name for this particular stuff here, and we're going to be talking about it when we get to these operators here. So as you can see, it is known as assignment, and that's where the name is coming from, variable assignment. So it's because of this operator here. So this is an operator, and the job of this operator here is that it's going to take whatever you have on the right and it's going to assign it to whatever you have on the left. So here we want to take a value here and we want to put it inside what is on the left hand side. For example, here now, all these variables that we declare at the top now, if I want to give them a value, so when you are giving value after you've already declared the variable, you don't need to use let again. No, the only thing you just type is the name of the variable like that. The same thing here too, the password. So I will call that one and I'm going to call it this Abdul like this. Again, the age is going to be 2. Then the name 1 is going to be 4 like this. Then the name 2 is going to be 35. The name 3 is going to be testing. If I want, you can see now I'm putting different value inside them. But right now, you already know the type of the value I'm using. So anything that is inside code, you know that that's string. And if you are typing normal number and it's not inside the code, you know that's your number there like that. But if it is in the code, you know that it's not number, it's a string. So here, what we did here is to declare the variable. But at this moment, the variable is not having any value. So which means it's not representing any value, but JavaScript know about the variable. And on this line here, we are now assigning. So which means we are putting a value inside our variable. So here, we declare the variable. Then after we declare the variable on this line, so everything we are doing here is variable declaration. So after we are done with the variable declaration, here we are now assigning a value to the variable. So and when you are assigning a value to the variable there, it means this variable, anytime you call it, this is the value it's going to give you. So for this second one, anytime you call it, this is the value it's going to give you. The third one, the same thing. The fourth one, and so forth like that, depending on the number of variable that you are working with there. So the variable now, this username is what we are now using to represent admin. Later on, I don't need to be typing this admin again. I will just call the username. It's going to give me whatever that is inside that particular variable are there. And if I go to the browser here, and if I call any one of them, for example, like this username, as you can see, it's giving me the value that that particular variable is holding there. So if I type age, it will give me 2. If I type name 3, you see that it's giving me this testing here. So we have a variable, which is a name that you are using to represent a value. And anywhere you need that value, just call the name, and it's going to return back for you the value that you save inside that variable. Because later on the page, there's a lot of things you are going to be targeting there, and you don't want to be doing that stuff again. Like, you don't want to be selecting your element every time. Once you select it the first time, you save it in a variable, and anywhere you need to use that element is that variable that you'll be talking to, because that variable now is representing the element. And once you talk to the variable, it's as if you are talking to that particular element that you have on the screen there, because you don't want to be selecting the element every time, because the way of selecting all these elements on the screen there used to be long, and you don't want to be doing this thing again and again. Once you do it once, you save it in a variable, and that variable is what you'll be calling to interact with that particular element that you target on the screen there, like that. So a variable is the name that you use to represent a particular value that you want to work with. But please, there are rules to the name of your variable. There are rules to the name of your variable. But before I get to that one, I will talk about this variable initialization here. So this one, you can use your lets. So if you want to deal with this one, you can use with let, you can deal with const, or you can deal with this var. But I'm going to explain only the let and const are there like that. So what is variable initialization here? So when you're talking about variable initialization, this one now is combining variable declaration and assignment together on one line. So when you declare a variable and you give it value straightforward, that's what we call variable initialization. And as you can see, the AI here has already suggested a particular one for me. But let me comment out all this one that I have here. So let me comment out all this one. Let me comment out all this one. Let me comment out all this one. So because I will be using all this name, and I don't want this thing to affect what I will be doing down here. So look at it here now. So instead of me using let, I'm using const. But what is the difference between let and const? I will soon explain the stuff now. But let me explain what is this variable initialization here. So what is this variable initialization? So what you are doing here is that you are creating a variable, and at the point of you creating a variable, you are giving it the value. So we create a variable because this variable does not exist before. We don't have this variable anywhere before. But right now, we are creating that variable, and at the point of creating that variable, we are assigning a value to that variable. And what you are doing here is what we call variable initialization here. So when you create a variable and you assign a value to it instantly, that's what we call initialization. So if you are asked to, okay, initialize this particular variable to 2, what they are telling you is that create a variable, and at the same time, you give it value straightforward on that line where you are creating the variable. Look at this one here. We create a variable, and after creating the variable, we are now assigning the variable on another line. But when you are doing the two of them together on one line, that's what we call variable initialization here. So if I want to initialize a variable username to admin here, so what I will just do is let username, and I'm assigning it to this value. And everything that I'm doing on this line is what we call variable initialization. So when you declare a variable and you give it a value, this is what we call initialization here. But after you've already initialized a variable and you are now changing the value, you are now changing the value of your variable here. So it's starting with admin, but now I want to change it to user. So on this line where we are creating the variable, what we are doing here is known as variable initialization. So when you create a variable for the first time and you put a value there, you are initializing your variable. So here we initialize, and here we assign. So when you've already created your variable and you are now changing the value of that variable, this is what we call assignment here. But when you are dealing with declaration and assignment together, we call it initialization. And when you're only dealing with assignment here, we call it variable assignment there. And when you're only creating the variable without giving it any value, we call it variable declaration. So we have declaration, we have assignment, and we have initialization. So when you initialize a variable, it means you create that variable and you give it a value. But at some time, you don't really know the value you want to use. So what do? At that moment, you don't declare it. And once you are done declaring it, later on when you now have the value, you can now put the value there. And that later on now is what we call assignment. So when you've already created your variable and you need to change the value, or you need to put a value there after you are done declaring the variable, that's what we call variable assignment, or you're assigning a value to your variable there. But if you don't have the variable and you are just creating that variable and at the same time you are giving it the value, then we call it variable initialization there. So which means at the point of creating the variable, you are giving it value. So when you create a variable and you give it value, we call it initialization. And when you create a variable and you did not give it any value, then we call it variable declaration. So this line here, so this line, so when I have this let's do like this, should be like this. This is a declaration here. So we just declare. So here we declare. So and when you declare, it means you only create a variable, you did not give it any value. But later on, when you now want to give it value, then you'll be using what we call assignment. So here now, if I give it 5, so what I'm now doing here is known as assignment here, because I declare the variable on a separate line, and another line I'm now giving it a value there like that. And what I'm doing here is declaration. This second one is assignment. So what is the difference between declaration and assignment here? If you look at it, when you're declaring a variable, it is going to start with this let, then followed by the name of the variable, and that's all. So then when you are declaring a variable, what you are going to have there is the let, or if you want, you can use the var, but I will not be using this var. So you can use this var too, it will still work, but I will not be using this var because it's the bad practice there. So I will always be using what you'll be seeing in the code there. So this let followed by the name of the variable. So what you are doing here is what we call variable declaration. But after you've already declared a variable and you need to put a value inside that variable, or you need to change the value that is there to another value, then what you are going to be doing is assignment. So when you are replacing the value that is inside a variable, or you are putting the value for the first time inside that your variable after you've already created that variable, what you are doing there is known as assignment. But when you combine the two of them together, so which means when you declare a variable and at the same time you give it a value, we call it variable initialization. So what is happening here on line 50 is what we call variable initialization. What is happening here on line 51 is known as variable initialization here. The same thing too, if I want, I can use this age. So these three of them here, we are actually initializing variable, because at the point of creation there, you are giving it its value. But that doesn't mean you cannot change it later on like that. You can still change it with the, but you can't change the one of const. So I'm going to explain this const. But with the let, when you initialize your variable, you can still change it to another value. So this age that is 20 here, I can replace it with another value later on. But when you are replacing it later on, what you'll be doing is assignment. Not that you'll be declaring it again, no. Because if you look at it, when you are dealing with assignment, you see that I'm not using anything like let, and I'm not using anything like const. So when you are assigning, the only thing you have there is the name of the variable, followed by this operator here, then followed by the value that you want to put inside that particular variable. I hope you are following. It's calling. Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah. I hope there's, because I received a call and the network I'm using, the call was coming from that side. Hope you can hear me.
Mm. Yeah, I can hear you now, sir.
Okay. So we have declaration, we have assignment of variable, and at the same time we have um, initialization. So when you are declaring a variable, you know that you're only telling JavaScript that this variable you want to have it, but you don't really have the value at this moment. So here I want to let I want to let a variable. So let student's age like this. So I don't really have the value for it yet, but I know that I'll be using this variable to represent a particular value later on. So you are talking to JavaScript that this is the variable that you want to use later on. And please, I told you things in JavaScript are case sensitive. So if I want to use this variable later on, this is the same way I'm going to call it. Look at the A. The A here is in uppercase. So if I want to call it later on, I must type it like that. So if I type it like this, it will know about it. But if I type this in this way, this is another variable entirely. So if I press enter, as you can see, it will tell you that it doesn't know where this one is coming from. Why? Because the way you type the A here is not the same way that the A is typed there too. So this one is one variable on its own, and this is another variable on its own. In JavaScript, all your variable are case, or everything in JavaScript are case sensitive. So if you are starting with small letter, when you create your variable in small letter, when you want to call it, you have to call it in small letter. If you do it in capital letter, that same way that you did it when you are creating your variable, that's the way you are going to call it when you are calling that particular variable. But the major thing here is that you can declare your variable, you can assign a value to your variable, and at the same time you can initialize your variable there. So how do you declare a variable? Just use the let keyword and followed by the name of the variable. So how do you assign a variable? Before you can assign a variable, that variable must have been defined before. You can't just assign any variable that is not defined. If I try to just assign a variable that is not defined, look at it right now, I've not declared any variable because I've already commented out this one here. So the browser is not seeing them again, or JavaScript is not seeing them again. So since it's not seeing them again, it means this is a brand new stuff. Yeah. But right now, I'm trying to assign to this variable age, but I've not really created this variable. So if I try to do it, it will complain. Because whatever variable you are working with, JavaScript must know about them. If the JavaScript don't know about the variable you are working with, it will complain. And if it complains, then your program is going to stop and it will not be able to run whatever that it needs to run again there, because you are trying to do something that doesn't exist there like that. So if you try to access something that is not there, it will not give you the value like that. But it looks like it's working. It's because we are working in the environment that is not strict. But once I activate the strict environment, you see that you must declare your variable either using let or using the const there before you'll be able to work with your variable there. So if I just say console log here now, if I try to console log out the age that is not declared at all, you see that this thing is going to complain because it will be looking for where the age is coming from. And since there is no variable like age, what we are going to get is just age is not defined like that. What's wrong with this browser? Okay, it's still loading. Let me wait for it to load. And as you can see right now, it's complaining that it doesn't know where age is coming from. So you can't just use any variable anyhow. You must declare or you must initialize your variable first before you can use it. So how do you declare? Just use your let followed by the name of the variable like that, which is going to be can go home. So which is going to be false. Don't forget, this is going to be true like this. The true is a value, which is a Boolean value. So I'm creating a variable. And what I'm doing on this line is what we call initialization here. Because at the point of creating the variable, we are assigning a value there. And since I'm giving it a value, this is what we call initialization. But if I did not give it a value, I just have it like this. This is what we call declaration. So when you create a variable and you don't give it a value at that moment, that's the declaration. But if you create a variable and you give it a value straightforward, this is what we call initialization like this. So after you've already created your variable, whether you do it through initialization or you declare the variable, you can actually change the value on another line to whatever you want. So here now, if I console log out the value, you see that we're going to get false. But after that line, I can actually update my variable. So how do you update your variable? You are going to assign your variable. And how do you assign? Mention the name of the variable followed by the whatever value that you want to put inside it. But this operator has to be there. So which is going to be testing. So our value or this variable is starting with this false. And on this line 63, I'm changing the value to another thing entirely. And now if I console log it out, you see that we are going to be getting the new value. It's going to remove the old value and it's going to replace it with the new value. So here on line 59, we started with this variable, we initialize it to false, and on line 60 is going to bring out the false. But now on line 62, we replace the value, which is this false, we replace it with testing. So which means after this line 62, the value will be the new one that you are using now. It will remove the old one. So when you are dealing with a variable, you can only give it one value. So if you give it the first value and you later change it to another value, it will remove the old one and it will replace it with new value. So we started with this value, but on line 62, we replace it with another value. And this is what we call a variable, because a variable can hold different value. So just tell it the value you want it to hold, and anytime you are calling that variable, it will give you back that value that you saved inside that particular variable. I hope you get the concept of variable now.
Yes, I get it. Yeah.
So variable, what you'll be using is to hold value. For example, here now on this page, let me go to my page. Look at it. Look at all these elements. You are going to be selecting them in your JavaScript. But instead of you selecting them every time, anytime you need to work with them, you can just do it once and you now save it in a variable. So that variable will now hold everything that is here. So anytime you need to talk to this element, is that variable that you now talk to. You don't need to be selecting this element again like that. So when you want to work with this element in JavaScript, JavaScript needs to be aware of this element. So you need to talk to JavaScript to select this element, but that element you are selecting there, anytime you want to work with it, you have to keep selecting. But that's waste of time, or the selecting method that you're going to be using is something that used to be long like that. And you don't want to be doing this thing again and again. So what do? You select it once and you now save it in a variable. And anytime you need that element, what you just call is the variable. Just like what we did right now. Can imagine that this first now is this element that is on the page. So we are saving it inside this variable. But on this line, we change what is inside the variable. Maybe I change it to this D. So which means after this line now, this variable is not representing this element again. It's not representing the element that is here like that. So variable is what you'll be using to hold value in your program there, because you are going to be having a lot of value that you need to hold together there. And since you need the same like that, you need to represent them using variable. So and anytime you select anything, what you just do is okay, talk to your variable, and variable is going to give you whatever that is inside it like that. So we have variable to hold any value. It can hold any value, and that's why I'm talking about element here, because that's what you'll be using later on. You'll be using it to hold some of these elements that you'll be targeting on the page, and you can now manipulate that element. Because before you can manipulate with any element here, you need to select it from JavaScript. But that selection now is something that used to be long, and you don't want to be doing that process again and again. And since you don't want to be doing that process and again, you now save it in a variable. And anytime you need to work with that element, is that variable you just communicate with like that. And whatever that is inside that variable, it's going to give you, and you do whatever you need to do with it there like that. Just know that we have variable, and variable, before you can use it, you need to create it first. And how do you create a variable? You can either declare it or you initialize the variable. So what is declaration? You are creating a variable, but that variable is not having a value yet. But when you are talking about initialization, it means at the point of creation, you are assigning a value into it, which is what we are going to be using a lot later on when we are targeting some of the elements on the page. Because we just create the variable and we put whatever element that we want to target inside that variable, and anyway I need to talk to that element is the variable that we'll be talking to, not that we need to select the element again on the page like that. You are going to see all this in action when we get to the time that we're going to be selecting, or when we are going to be dealing with some other concept here later on like that, because variable is very important and you don't want to be typing the value every time. So what do? You save it in a variable, and anytime you need it, you just call that variable and it will give you the value. But you can actually change the variable. And what do I mean by change? Change means that you can change the value that is inside a variable from one value to another value. It can be of the same type and it can be of different type. As you can see here, I started with the first, which is of type boolean, being assigned to this particular variable here. But on line 62, we replace the value with another one. So which means anytime you call the variable again, it will be giving you the new value that you put inside it like that. So a variable can be changed when you declare a variable or when you initialize a variable using this let. Anytime you declare or you initialize a variable with this let, you can change the value of the variable. But what will not happen if you use const? Because don't forget, I told you that you can use let and you can use const when you are initializing your variable. So there, anytime you use const, what this means is that the variable is going to be constant. So what this means is that your variable is going to be constant. So here is going to be constant variable. So anytime you use const, your variable is going to be constant. And whatever value you are putting there, what that thing means is that you cannot change it again. So anytime you declare a variable or anytime you initialize a variable and that variable is being declared or is being initialized using this const, it means that variable you cannot change its value again to another value. It is constant. You cannot replace the value with another one. So if I try to replace the value, it will give you error. So anytime you have a variable and you declare or you initialize the variable using this const, you cannot change the value of the variable again. So here you can only access the value. So here I can call the variable like this. It's going to give me this value. What is this? So if I call the variable, it's going to give me its value, but I cannot replace the value. So if you want to replace the value, you must use let or you have to use this var. If you don't want to replace the value that you saved in your variable, you have to use a const. So if you don't want to replace the value that you saved in your variable, you are going to use const. So if I go to next line now, and if I try to replace or if I try to assign to that particular variable, you see that this thing is going to complain. So if I just do Rakib like this, so if I save it, you see that JavaScript is going to complain. Why is it going to complain? It's because we are using const. And what does it const mean? The const means that whatever basic value that you are putting inside your variable, you cannot replace it again. So look at it. Assignment to a constant variable. It's not because I name it constant variable. I just want to use it to explain this concept there. You can name it anything. The major thing here is this const here. Any variable that you declare or that you initialize using this const here, you cannot change the value to another value again. So here we started with 5. Anytime you want to use this variable, it must always be 5. You can't just go to another line and say you want to modify the value to another thing. So any variable that you know that its value is not going to change, it's always good that you use const. And any one of them that you know that the value will change, just go with let. If you know the value is going to change, you are going to use let. But if you know the value is not going to change, you are going to use const. If you look at it now, you see that this stuff is not going to complain. As you can see, it's not complaining here. And if I console log out the constant variable, you are going to see that it will print out the new value for us there. What's wrong with this VS Code? Gee. So let me save this stuff, and if I console log it out now, you are going to see that the value is going to change from 5. First it will print 5 because that's what we are doing on this line. It will firstly print 5 for us, but on line 68 we change the value to another. We change the variable to another value, and since we change it to another value, then it's going to give us the new value. Why? Because we use let. If you are using let, you can replace the value of the variable, but if you use const, you cannot replace the value. If you use let, you can replace the value, but if you use const, you cannot replace the value. That const is just representing constant, which means you cannot replace the content of the variable. But once you use let, then you'll be able to modify whatever that is there. As you can see, the first time is it 5, the second time now is now Abdurraqib because we've already modified it on this line 68. But now if I change this let to const, you see that JavaScript now is going to complain and it will not run the line 69 for us again. The only thing you just see is 5. You will never see this console log for Abdurraqib again. Why? Because it's stopping on this line. And why is it stopping on this line? Because you declare the variable or you initialize the variable here to be constant. And since it's constant, you cannot modify its value again to another one. But what are you doing? You are trying to change the value on line 68. And since we are trying to change the value on line 68, yeah, and we said on this line that it must be constant. So JavaScript will complain and it's going to stop on this line. As you can see, it's not going to the next line. Anywhere JavaScript is seeing error, it will stop on that line and it will not do anything again until you fix the error on the line that is detecting that particular error there. So what do we need to do in order for us to be able to remove this error? One way of doing it is by disable this line that is modifying the variable. But if you know that you want to modify the variable, then you are not to use const. What you are to use is let. So if you want to modify the variable later on, you are going to use let. But if you don't want to modify the variable after you've already initialized it, you are going to use const. So that's just the rules to using this const or using let. So if you know that you are going to modify the variable, use let. If you know that you are not going to modify the variable, use const there. Hope you are following. It's 51. I can't hear you.
I'm with you, sir. I'm with you.
Okay, so let's move to the next one. This is where things we started comes in here, because everything in JavaScript, one topic is based on the other topic. If you look at it, the variable here now, we are using some of the stuff we talked about under the basic type, and that's the reason why you cannot skip any one of them. Because if you skip this basic data type and you just go to variable, there's some stuff that we'll be using here that will not know what is going on, like the string or the number, whatever stuff. The same thing too, when you are dealing with operators, operators work with your values or variable. If you are using variable to represent value, for example, here now, imagine we have the a variable. Let's score 1 to be 35, and let's score 2 now to be 120. What if I want to know the summation of this score of this stuff? What if I want to know the summation? So we can use some of this operator here, which is under arithmetic. So all those mathematics are all those basic mathematics are operator there. We have it under this arithmetic. So we have the plus, which is your addition. We have the subtraction. So this asterisk is what we use for multiplication. This one is what we use for division, and this is what we use for modulus, and this is what we use for power here. So I'm going to show you each one of them. So yeah, let me create a variable for results. So we're going to have another variable, and this one is going to be results like this. And what are we going to be doing here? So I'm going to have the score 1, then plus score 2. So this plus here is what we call operators here. Again too, this is one of the operator, which is the second one on the list, which is assignment. And what is assignment? I've already explained it here. What is doing? You use it to assign whatever that is on the right into what you have on the left there like that. So when you are dealing with the assignment, this is it here. So you are going to have a variable on the and on the right you are going to have value. And what are you doing there? We are taking the value on the right and we are putting it on the left there, and that's what is happening down here too. So what is going to happen here? What is going to happen is that we have variable score 1 here plus variable score 2. So what JavaScript is going to do, it will look for this variable where you have the declaration for it like that. It will check for its value, and the value of this variable is going to add it to the second variable here. And once you output the result, you see that we are going to get 35 plus 120 there. But what is going on this line here? What we are doing here is we are adding two values together, and the value we are adding here is this 35 and 120. But if you look at it, I'm not calling the 35 and 120 directly. I'm calling the variable because 35 is assigned to score 1, 120 is assigned to score 2. So anytime you call any of these variable, it will just give you whatever value that is inside them. So which means here, if I use score 1 plus score 2 like this, you see that it's going to add the two value together, which is this 35 plus 120. And what is going to give us? It will give you your normal mathematics addition that you know already there like that. So plus, when you are dealing with number, it works like your normal mathematics, but it doesn't work like that. So when you are dealing with string, If you are dealing with string, it's doing something else. But here, when you are using it with number, it will give you what you are expecting there. So if I do 3 plus 5, then you are going to get 8. If you have minus 3, minus 2, or plus 3 like this, you are going to get 0, because minus 3 plus 3 is just 0. Or you have minus 10, then plus 20, you are going to have 10. Or you have 20 like this. Again, you can use the minus 1, so which is what we have next. So 20 minus 10, as you can see, we still have 10. Or 30 minus 2, you see that we have 8. Or 2 minus 30, you still get the value. So just like your normal mathematics, anywhere you need to deal with them, just use the arithmetic operator like this plus, this minus here, or this asterisk, which is what we use for multiplication. So this asterisk is used for multiplication. So if I use 2 times 3 now, you see that we have 6. If it is 2 plus 3, you know that it's going to be 5. And again, 2, if it is 3 times 8, you see that we're having 24. And 3 plus 8, it is 11 here. Again, 2, 3 minus 8, or 8 minus 3. All those your normal mathematics stuff, it will work like the same way it used to work in math there, like that. So you can add two numbers together or multiple numbers together. You can subtract multiple numbers from each other. You can multiply all the numbers you want together. So for example here, 2 times 3 times 6 is going to multiply everything together. So 2 times 3, that is 6. 6 times 6, and as you can see, we have 36 on the screen like this. In order for you to see the result instantly, that's why I'm using the console log. I'm using the console directly. I'm not doing from here because it's going to take time to type and still showing you on the screen there. Just going to be a waste of time like that. So we have arithmetic operators here, and one of them is the plus, which is the addition. We have the subtraction, we have the multiplication here, and again too we have the division. So here, 1 divided by 2, you know, that's 0.5, which is half. So when you divide 1 by 2, you know you are going to get 0.5. So if it is 2 divided by 4, which is still going to be the same thing, or I have 2 divided by 3 or 3 divided by 2, as you can see, we are getting the value for the division here like this. So when you divide 3 by 2, this is the value. But what if you want to get the remainder of the division? When you are dividing two value, you know, you can either get the quotient or you get the remainder there. So how do we get, this is it here. So let me, because this one is normally used tricky, this particular one. So assuming I have a value that I want to divide. So for example here, 2 divided by 10. So when you divide 2 by 10, or when you divide 10 like this, then by 2. So let's start with this basic one. You know, when you do it like this, what we are going to get here is just 5. So when you divide 10 divided by 2, this is 5. But this stuff here, what is the remainder of the division? So the remainder of the division here is going to be 0. Because anytime you divide 10 by 2, it's going to give you 5 without any remainder there. But if you look at this one will never give you the quotient, does never give you the same value that we have there. Because if you try to divide 2 by 10, it can't go there. So what do? You write a particular value. Then from there, how many value do you have before you get to that one, which is going to be the remainder there. And that's what this operator used to give us. So this modulus operator here is there to give you the value of the remainder of the division. So when you use the slash, it will give you this value here. So the slash will give us the value here, while the modulus operator will give you the value of the remainder there like that. So if you divide 3 by 2, what is the value? How many this thing can you see there? It's going to be 1 like that. And how many number remaining for you to get to 2? Then it's going to be 1 like that. So what is the remainder? You can quickly use this operator to get it like that. So here we have 3 divided by 2. This one will give you the quotient value. But what if I want to get the remainder of the division? So here now you can now use 3 module 2 like this. So as you can see, the remainder is 1. The same thing too, 10 divided by 2, you know you are going to have 5. Well, what is the remainder of this division? So you can use 10 module 2 like this, and the remainder is 0, which is what I put out here. So when you divide 10 by 10 divided by 2, it is 5. That's what this slash is giving you. But what is the remainder? The remainder is 0. So how do you get the remainder of this division here? that's where the modulus operator comes in. So this modulus operator is what you'll be using to get the remainder of the division out there. So when you just say 10, when you say 2 divided by 10, the answer is 0.2. But how do we get the remainder of this division here? So we can now use 2 module 10 like this. And as you can see, the remainder of this particular stuff is 2. So when you divide 2 by 10, the remainder is 2. And when you divide 2 by 10, the quotient there is 0.2, which is these two are this 0 here. But that's because this thing is giving 0.2 here, doesn't mean other one to follow that pattern. No? Because if you look at it here, this one is 1.5 for the quotient, but the remainder is actually 1. So it's because this one is in, when you're dealing with 10, numbers in tens, you always get it in this form. That the one at the front is your normal division, and the one at the back here after the dot is your remainder. But it doesn't work like that for all the number there like that. But modulus is really useful when you are dealing with some calculation later on there that deal with mathematics there. So we have the plus, which is the simple one. We have this minus, which is the subtraction there. You have the asterisk to multiply. You have this slash, the forward slash for division, and we have this modulus for remainder of the division there. And lastly, we have this double asterisk for power. So when you want to do something like this, for example, I want to have 2 raised to power 3. So I have 2, and on top of 2, I want to have 3, or I want to have 3 raised to power 2. How do you do something like this? Because there's nothing like power here in JavaScript. So how do you represent it? So it's by using 2, then double asterisk. If it is 1 asterisk, what you are doing is that you are multiplying the 2 numbers together. But if it is 2 asterisk, what you are doing is this one here. So you are saying 2 raised to power 3, and as you can see, the answer is 8. If it is 1 asterisk, that's multiplication. The answer will be 6. And if it is this one, then it's going to be 2. What you are doing here is 2 raised to power 3. And again, too, I can do 3 raised to power 2. And as you can see, we are having a separate answer or result here. But you know, if you use multiplication, the answer will always be the same thing, because 3 times 2 is still the same thing as 2 times 3, because this thing, we call it, so let me go into mathematics here. So let me just stop here. So this is how you can use the arithmetic operator. Which one is not clear among these operator here? Which one is not clear?
Sir, can we have 2 times 3 plus 5?
Of course, yes. That's where this thing comes. That's what we call. That's where you now start using precedence. Don't forget, when you are doing your mathematics, there's some operators you need to perform first before the other one. So that's the same thing you are going to do here. So if you want to do that, if you just do 2, call the number 2 what?
2 times 3 plus 5.
So you get the results here. So you know, since the way you are going to do is that 2 times 3, no, that's 6. 6 plus 5, that's 11. But you know, it will not work if you do it like this. It will do something else. If you just do 5 plus 3, then times 2, even though it's giving the same, but let me put 2 first, then times 3. It's still going to give us the same thing. Because here, the way the operator works is that you are not to add first. You have to multiply according to your board mass there like that. So that's the same way it works here. It works like your normal mathematics. You can combine the operators together, but the problem there is that you must know the precedence. Like, what are they going to follow? Like, if you have multiple operators together, which one am I going to do first? Because here now, if you do 5 plus this one first, you know the answer will never be 11. But because the operation needs to be done first, that's why you have to do 2 times 3, which is 6. Then you now add to 5. That's what is going on. It's following the normal mathematics. But if you don't want it to follow normal mathematics, then you can now use your brackets to change the definition of how this thing is going to operate. So here now, here, as you can see, the answer is now different. Because the first thing it's going to do is that it will add 2 to 5, which is 7. Then 7 will now be multiplied by 3. You see the same thing? The difference there is just the bracket. So when you are giving the definition of how this thing is going to do the mathematics there. But if you don't put the bracket, it's going to follow the normal mathematics. So all the operators that have the higher precedence is going to do them first before doing the one that have the low precedence there. So if you have multiplication and plus together, you have to do multiplication first before you do plus. If you have a plus and minus, you do the one that comes first. So like that. Because there are some of them that have the same precedence, like multiplication and division. they have the same precedence. So any one of them that come first, that's what you do. And what did I mean by that? So if I have 2 divided by 3 multiplied by 5 like this. So as you can see, what it's doing first is dividing the stuff before multiplying. But if I have it like this, if I have 5 multiplied by 3, then divided by, as you can see that the result is different because the way
Yeah.
you arrange them, the one is seen first, since they have the same precedence, multiplication and division are on the same level. So the one is seen first, that's what it's going to do. So since it's seen multiplication first, it's multiplying this one by this, which is going to 15. Then 15 divided by 2, that's why it's giving us 7.5. Because if I do 5 times 3, that's 15. Then 15 divided by 2, that's where it's getting is 7.5. But for this first one here, it's dividing 2 by 3 first. Then after it divides 2 by 3, that's when it's now multiplying it by that 5. So it 0.66666 like this. Then multiply by 5. And as you can see, that's why it's getting this 3.333. So some of these operators, they're on the same level, and some of them, they are not on the same level. Those ones that are on the same level, any one of them that you see first, that's what you work on. But the one that is not on the same level, the one that have the highest level, is what you do before you do the other one. This is just normal mathematics stuff. I don't even need to be explaining this one. It's not part of between right now because we have a lot of things to do like that. Later, you won't be doing much of mathematics stuff, but if the application you are working with requires this thing, that's when you'll be using it. But you won't be using this thing a lot like that these days. But the one you always work with is the other one that I want to explain here, which is this comparison operator here, because it's very important. It's something that you're going to be using later on like that. And some stuff I'm missing there. So I have this equal. I don't want to have this first one. Let me just have only this one. So again, too, I don't want to be using this one again because it's not there. So we have this greater than, we have the less than, we're greater than or equal to, we have lesser than equal to like this. And these are what we call comparison or relational operators here. So all this one, they are referred to as a relational operator. So you are comparing whether something is greater than another thing or they are equal to each other. For example, here now, you want to check whether a particular user is logging. What do? You compare the value, whether it is related to the login value or not. So if it's related to the login value, you do something. If it's not related to the login value, you do another thing. But these operators here now are what you can use to check or to compare values there. And what are the comparisons that you have there? You have this greater than that you can use for numbers. For example, here, I want to check whether 5 is greater than 3 or is less than 3 or it equals to 3 or 5 is equals to 5 or 5 is not equals to 5 and so forth like that. So that's where you can use all this operator here. And please, this operator here, they will now return true or false. Those are the only results you have. Anytime you are using comparison operator, the result will only either be true or false. Anytime you are dealing with comparison operator, the result you are going to get here will either be true or false. You can't get the two, only one. So if you are getting true, then you know that you do something. If you are not getting true, you do another thing. For example, here now is 5 greater than 3, like that. So you can see it's returning true. So greater than here is one of the comparison operator. Another one is less than, is 5 less than 10. As you can see, it's still true. Is 15 less than 3? As you can see, it's false. So these operators here will either return true or false based on the logic that you know there. So is 15 less than 3? No. And since it's no, that's false. Anything that is like no, false, 0, or anything that is giving negative there, they are always false. And anything that is giving positive, they are always true. So like yes, okay, and so forth like that. So all of them, they are referred to as true. So when you ask a question, if that question is yes, the answer is yes, that's true. If the answer is no, then that's false. So if is 5 greater than 3, your answer here will either be true, either be yes or no. So if it is yes, then you know that the result will be true. But if your answer is no, you know that the result is going to be false. So anytime you are dealing with all these comparison operator, the operator will either return true or false there. And one of the simplest one here is greater than. another one is a less than. But here, look at what is going to happen. Is 5 greater than 3? Yes. Is 5 greater than 5? As you can see, it is no. Because 5 will never greater than 5. Just like say you are saying that you are greater than yourself. It's not possible, but you can actually greater or equal to yourself. Can be equal or greater than yourself because you are combining two things together. So this one here, this operator here is what we call greater than or equal there. So this one is looking for two things, or is looking for one of the stuff here. He's looking for whether this thing is greater or it is equal. So when it is greater, it will be true, or when it is when it is equal, it will still be true. So if I use greater or equals to 5, as you can see, it is true. If I use 5 is greater or equals to 3, it will still be true. Why is it true? Is because we are checking two things here. So it's either this one or this one. So it's checking the two of them. So if it is greater than 3, then it is okay. Or if it is equals to 3, it is still okay. But if you use 1, so if you only use greater than, this is strict. So it means it must always be greater than. So it will be true for this one, but there is no way 5 will be greater than 5. So this is what we call the strict comparison here. But when you are using the other one, which is going to have the two operators together, please, they are going to be together, greater than, then followed by this operator here, which is this assignment. So when you combine the two of them together, what you are doing here is known as greater, is known as this comparison operator. And the meaning here is that you are checking whether the value on the left is greater or equals to the value on the right hand side there. And if you can see, it is false, because there's no way 5 will be greater than 10, and at the same time, there's no way 5 will be equals to 10. So since none of them is true, then you are going to get false. But if one of them is true, then you are going to get true. If one of them is true, it is okay. Here, 5 is greater than 3, but 5 is not equals to 3. But since one of them is true, then the two of them are okay there, like that. So the other one too is less than or equal to. So here we can have 5 is less or equals to 10, which is going to be true. Even though 5 is not equals to 10, but 5 is actually less. So that's why it is true. The same way too, I can have 5 is less or equals to 5. This one too will still be true, because 5 is not less than 5, but 5 is actually equals to 5, like that. So, and if I use something else that is not up to that, maybe I'm using 2 like this. As you can see, this one is not going to work. Why is it not working? It's because the two conditions are false. So the first one, there's no way 5 will be less than 2, and at the same time, there's no way 5 will be equals to 2. So since none of them is working, then what you are going to get back is false. And you're going to be using this thing a lot later on, like that. For example, here on the page, I want to check whether the color on this text is red. So if it is color red, do this. If it's not color red, do another thing. And but the one I just mentioned here, that's what this one is there for. I want to check whether particular something like I want to check whether something is equal or it is not equal, and that's where these three symbol comes in. You have to combine them together like this, so 3 of them, and that's what you can use to check whether something is equal or it is not equal there, like that. For example, now let me create 2 variables. I want to create a variable text color like this. So text color, the text color is going to be red, like that, because this thing is not just used for number only. You can use this thing anywhere that this thing will be making sense there, like that. So what do I want to do? I want to check whether this variable text color is the same thing. Please look at it. I'm using 3 equal sign, so I want to check whether it's equal to a particular value. So for example, is it equals to blue? As you can see, is returning false, because the value of our text is red. But are we checking whether it is a blue? So, and what did I want to do later on the page? I'm checking whether it is blue. If it is blue, I want to do something here. If it is not blue, I want to do another thing. And what did I want to do there? If the color is blue, change the colors to red. And if the color is not blue, then change it to another one, like that. So, and as you can see here, we are using this comparison operator to check whether what we have on the left is the same thing as what we have on the right. So if they are the same thing, you get true, and if they are not the same thing, you get false. So now, if I put this in there, you see that it will be true. But now the shock, if I put capital R, can you see that it is false? And this is what I'm telling you. What you are doing in JavaScript is case sensitive. So if you look at it, when we're using small letter r, it's returning true. But now that we change it to capital letter R, it returns false. Everything in JavaScript are case sensitive. So don't be comparing small letter red to capital letter red later on, and you now be blaming the program that is not working. It's working, oh, you are the one that is not doing it according to the way you're supposed to do it like that. So when you are working with this thing, you should always check that this thing is following the case that you are using there like that. So if this thing is in us small case there, so which is a small letter, you are going to type it like that too. And if it is in this form and you want to compare them, you are going to type it in the same way. As you can see that it's not giving us the same answer when we use this red and when we use this red here, because they are not the same thing. This is small r and this is capital R. And in JavaScript, things are case sensitive, so they are not the same thing. So when you are dealing with logical operator, when you're dealing with this comparison operator there, always make sure that wherever you are testing, they are of the same type, and again, to the case are matching it. If the case is not matching, it will not give you what you're expecting there, like that. And for the other one, this is not equal. So this one is the opposite of equal. So, and what is this one doing? This one is going to negate the results of this equal one here. And what the equal is doing, so for example here, I have R. So I'm checking whether R is the same thing as R. As you can see, it is true. So when you are using this operator, whatever you have on the left must be equal to whatever you have on the right. So when you have the value on the left and you have another value on the right, and if the two values are the same thing, this one is going to return true. But if the two values are not the same thing, it's going to return false. For example, now if I put Q here, you see that it's returning false. When the value are the same, it will return true. It can be the same thing for number too. As you can see, it's returning true. But if I do it with other value, as you can see, it's returning false. So when the value on the left is the same thing as the value on the right, you get true. But if the value are not the same thing, you get false. So this last one is now the opposite of what this one is doing there. What this equality is doing. So if the two values are the same, it will return false. But if the two values are not the same, it will return true. Please look at this, when you are dealing with equality, if the two values are the same, it's going to return true. But if the two values are not the same, it's going to return false. So if the two values are the same thing, you are going to get true. But if the two values are not the same thing, you are going to get false. But when you are dealing with not equal, this one, if the two values are the same thing, it's going to be false. But if the value are not the same thing, it's going to be true. Can you see that they are switching the value? If you are dealing with normal equality, if the two values are the same thing, you get true. If the two values are not the same thing, you get false. But when you are checking this one, when you are using this one, which is not equal, when the two values are the same thing, you get false. And when the two values are not the same thing, you get true. Anytime this one is giving you true, just negate the result. That's what this one is going to give you. There like that. So whatever this one is giving you, negate the result. That's the result of this one. So which means here now, 5 equal to 5. We are getting true. So if you use this one, that means the result is going to be false. Because you negate the result that you get there, and you know the opposite of true is just false. And the opposite of false is true. That. So if I use 5, it's not the same thing as 5. This is false. Because there is no way you'll be telling me that 5 is not the same thing as 5. You are saying that 5 is not the same thing as 5. But we know that 5 is actually the same thing as 5. So that's why it is false. But now if I use 3, it's not the same thing as 5. Yes, it actually is obvious. Because here now, 3 and 5 are not the same thing. And since they are not the same thing, this one will return true. But if they are the same thing, it will return false. When you are dealing with this not equal. The not equal is looking for the negative value. So if the negative is what you have there, then to convert it to true. But if it is positive value that is there, then to convert it to false, like this. Hope this thing is not, I'm not speaking in tongue.
No, I got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So when it is equal like this, the left and the right must be the same thing. But when it is like this, the left and the right must not be the same thing. So if the left and the right are not the same thing, it is true. But if the left and the right are the same thing with this one, it is false. like that. And this is what we call the comparison operator there, like that. So the comparison operator is really useful when you have two value that you want to compare, like that. For example, now, like I have a username. You know, when you go to a site, different user can actually sign in. Admin can sign in, normal user can sign in, like maybe student and so forth like that. But how do you check? In all of them, you are saving in a variable username. So I have a username and I have it like this. But I want to show something to the user when their username is admin, and if the username is something else, I want to do another thing. So what do? I will check by using my this comparison operator. So I will check if username is the same thing as MD, like this. So if it is the same thing as MD, just show something for them, or maybe at the top, welcome our boss, this is so so whatever stuff. But you look at it now, I'm using this condition now. Is the username the same thing as MD? As you can see, it's returning false, like this. Or is the username the same thing, username the same thing as admin? As you can see, it is true. Then since it's true, I want to do something else. But all these things that I'm talking about right now, you are going to know about them by the time we get to the page later on, that we are going to be displaying some content based on the type of the user that we have in our variable. So if the user is admin, show welcome admin. If the user is another name, then show welcome alone. Don't add admin to the stuff like that. And these are what you'll be using to check what is inside that particular, because you compare, and based on that comparison now, you know what you need to display on the screen to the user there. And that's the reason why all these constructs are needed before you start jumping into where you'll be modifying the content on the page there, like that. And lastly, the one I'm going to be explaining here is this time. I don't want it to go more than this. This is 1 hour 20 minutes. It's already 1 hour 20 something minutes already. So this is why we stop, because I don't want this video to go more than this. So I'll quickly go over this logical one tomorrow, and from there I'll move to this complex type, like that. Talk about the function too. Tomorrow I will really move fast there, because the video will be there. So it's something that you can go back and rewatch again and again. So I won't really talk much. I will just go over a lot of things, because in the next week there, I want to move into the DOM here, which is what you'll be using to manipulate the content on the page, so that you can see all this thing in action there, like that. But all these basic stuff are required, because later on when we want to be doing some stuff here, or when you want to be manipulating some content on the page, you need all these condition here. You need to be doing some of this condition here to check whether that element is having this thing or not. If it's having it, do this one. If it's not having it, do another thing. And these are the operators you'll be using to check some stuff on the element there, like that. So this is where I'm going to stop, so that I can upload this in.